Serious, what's the worst emotional pain you had to endure? My mom when I was 14 having a mental breakdown and didn't want to be a mom anymore. On a snowy day, everything I had was thrown in front yard and sent to live in foster care. The worst. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. My dad had esophageal cancer. We had already tried all the treatments and nothing was working. Eventually they brought him home, by his own wishes, so he could die peacefully in his own home under the care of hospice. One day, I got off the school bus to an ambulance in our driveway. I was 100% ready to see my father being wheeled out and to try and comfort my mother. What I saw when I got in I was totally unprepared for. My mother had died. Brain aneurysm. Died before she hit the floor. My father passed 2 days later. I'm so sorry. Committing our adult son for the first time into a mental health facility for a mental illness we didn't know he had until it was to a crisis point. I still have nightmares over this. Freaking sucked. The second time was worse because he chose to stop taking his meds. So far, this year has been event free. Fingers crossed. We are 1 year without a hospitalization. My brother was drugged and robbed in Uganda while there for work and ended up dying after not being able to receive adequate medical treatment. This was 6 weeks after his son was born. It's been just over a year and it's destroyed his wife, my parents and me all in different ways. Lost the closest person to me and I'll never have that bond with anyone else. Pain doesn't even describe it. I'm so sorry. My best friend took his own life in February 2016. He was the closest thing I had to a soulmate, and though we only saw each other in person a few times a year, we lived in different cities, we talked to each other online pretty much every day. We actually went out of our way to look for good instant messaging programs that met our standards after Skype became crappy. Even though I have a small but close-knit group of friends I saw, and continue to see, far more regularly, he was effectively 70% of my social life, and pretty much the only person I felt I could truly relate to. Now, 1.5 years later, I'm still not sure how to cope with the loss, and I still miss him more than I can convey in words. Strangely enough, he had been offline for 2 consecutive days, a first for the man. Normally he would tell me if he planned to be absent for more than a day, which would happen occasionally if his dad was coming to visit him from overseas. I woke up that morning and saw a message from his brother, who I pretty much never talked to, on FB. I didn't even have to read it to know what had happened. I wish I could hug you. Nobody should ever feel such pain. Reading this hit me hard more, because I met my best friend online as well and met him in real life several years later. There was a situation where I lost him for some months, but it's nothing compared to what you've been through. Again, sorry that you lost your best friend. If ever wish to talk, let me know. My parents were both extremely emotionally, psychologically, and physically abusive. It was extremely difficult for me to accept because their words said they loved me, and I trusted them. I thought if I just get the house clean and get my grades up, the screaming will stop. They'll stop threatening to throw me out and hitting me. Then later, it was she's angry all the time because she is pregnant. When she has a baby, she'll stop hating me and stop feeding dad stories about me, and they'll both treat me like a human being. Then when I was in high school, it was if I get good grades and get into a good university, she won't be stressed anymore, and she'll love me. The worst day for me was the day I brought my mom a near perfect report card, deep cleaned the entire house from top to bottom, gave my younger siblings the best, most fun and educational day ever, made a beautiful supper for the whole family, only for her to scream at me until my ears rang, for hours, throw things at me, hit me, spit in my face, break face, break face, break face, break. I had nowhere to go, no friends to stay with, no money, no anything. As I tried to get some sleep on a random side street in my grandma's car she left to me, half expecting the cops to swoop down because I was fairly sure my mom had reported it stolen. I realized that there was nothing I could do to make her not hate me. I realized there was something wrong deep inside me that I couldn't change. I was 16 years old. I carried that feeling with me for many years. I hope you've realized by now that there was something wrong with your mom, and not with you. Sister's partner blew his head off with a shotgun. She and my mum found the body after he didn't return home that night and they went out searching. My mum told me how they'd parked at the bottom of the valley and were just combing his regular spots. The gun was missing from the cabinet. They saw his Jeep and my sister ran towards it, disappeared from my mum's view when she went behind it. All she heard was my sister's screams. I wasn't even there, but that scene plays in my mind every single night. I don't know how my mum and sister cope. Before we headed to the funeral, we were all at my sister's place, where she and her partner lived. I was stood near the kitchen door and couldn't see the driveway, but she was further down. I remember just watching her and saw her focus on something, and slowly, she just fell apart. I can't even describe the look on her face. 10 seconds later I saw the hearse pull up with the coffin. I know her turmoil is 100x greater than mine, but knowing and even just imagining the pain she must feel kills me. Speaking as someone who has been in your sister's shoes, your empathy is really evident and beautiful. I'm so sorry you're haunted by this, but I'm sure you were a great comfort to your sister and mother. I hope you guys are doing okay these days. My partner of 10 years had an affair and walked out on me and, at the time, our 4-month-old baby to be with her. It completely took me by surprise as we weren't having any major issues besides adjusting to being new parents. He felt differently and told me how he had been unhappy for years. I never did anything for him. I never wanted to go out and do things anymore. We didn't have enough sex and the house wasn't clean enough. Completely disregarded the fact that I did all of the cooking, cleaning, bill paying, grocery shopping, laundry and other household stuff, while working full time and then working and being pregnant, and then doing all that and taking care of a breastfed baby. He worked nights so never had to wake up with the baby and slept during the day, so all the childcare fell to me. Since this all happened, he's treated me like crap, blames me for him cheating and tells me how I'm a terrible, sad person who will never find happiness because I don't embrace their relationship with open arms. He barely sees or takes care of our child. It's been about 6 months and he lives with the woman he cheated on me with and her child, and she's now pregnant. Neither one of them gets why I am angry and hurt and upset and feel I need to get over it already and move on. I just don't get how a person can just walk out of a 10-year relationship, walk out on their child and just start a new life like the last decade never happened. 6 months is nothing compared to 10 years. You have every right to be hurt and angry. I wish you and your child the best. My ex-girlfriend told me that I was a chore to talk to. Nothing has ever shattered my confidence like that, and it killed me inside to hear someone who had seemed so interested in talking to me to say that. Since then I've shied away from talking to people too much since I'm too scared of annoying them or something like that. It wasn't a chore to read that. My husband died almost 2 weeks after we got married. He was diagnosed with tongue cancer just 2 days after my father died of brain cancer. He had a surgery to remove his tongue and things were going okay until they found tumors in his lungs and spine. I never truly believed that he could pass away. He was so young and full of life. It just couldn't possibly happen. We had a wedding planned for the 25th of August, but on the 8th he had an episode due to complications from diabetes and we decided to elope at the hospital. It was a beautiful ceremony that was put together within an hour. Bought the marriage certificate from a drugstore across the street. Unfortunately he never recovered and the next week was very up and down. I remember when he passed, I had woken up at about 5 AM with this horrible feeling that something was wrong, and about 15 minutes later my sil called me with the news. He died on the 24th, the day before we were going to originally get married. Everything in my body told me to spend the night at the hospital with him, but I had to work the next day and I said to myself that if just come to see him in the morning, and then he was gone. The funeral was on my birthday. A lot of my family passed away this year. I lost the love of my life, my father, my grandparents, a close family friend, and my kitty I've had for 12 years. The worst part about it is I had a failed major abdominal surgery in the middle of the year that caused me a great deal of physical and emotional pain, and it made me unable to properly take care of my husband and enjoy the last months we had together. I miss him. Jesus Christ. I don't even want to try to imagine. I'm so sorry. Just so sorry. If I could wish for anything tonight it would be to hug you in person. I was on oxycodone for pain. Had been on them for just over a year. Didn't like how they made me feel, so in my infinite wisdom I decided to quit. Cold turkey. Was living with my parents. but me quitting coincided with them going on vacation for 2 weeks, a cruise. I should have waited, but I didn't. I developed a chemical imbalance-induced severe depression. By the start of week 2, I had enough. Feeling like utter crap, constant sweating, too hot, too cold, no appetite, anxiety 24/7, hopelessness 24/7. For whatever reason I figured my life was pointless. No reason to go on. My brother had moved out months before, but left his Bowflex behind. I had been using it to lose weight. I decided I was going to kill myself and make it look like an accident when using that thing. So I sat up in bed, turned and put my feet on the ground. This was it, and then the phone rang. Mum was calling to see how I was, but they didn't know about the detox. I answered, and I obviously didn't say anything about what was going down, and acted as if everything was fine. But hearing her voice made me realize that I couldn't do that to my parents. To have them come home and find my body like that. Got back into bed, cried myself to sleep, and when I woke up I felt a bit better. I binge watched The West Wing until my parents got home to keep my mind focused on something not crappy. Great show BTW. I've told this here before, but it's just as relevant now. I'm 22 now, this happened when I was 19, and I still think about it almost every day. From the time I was really young, 4 or 5 probably, my dad had kidney problems. He was on dialysis for a while, got a transplant that lasted for a good few years, and then back to dialysis. The last stint on dialysis lasted 10 years. He finally decided he was in too much agony to continue treatment. He came home with the plans to live his last few days in the comfort of his home surrounded with loved ones. Fast forward 2 weeks, which is a long time to survive without dialysis for those who aren't aware. Dad's health was going downhill fast. All the symptoms of the end stages of uremic poisoning. We knew the inevitable was going to happen, and probably very soon. He was gasping for air with every breath. To this day it's the hardest thing I've ever witnessed. Hospice had provided comfort drugs for the end stages, namely concentrated liquid morphine. I couldn't stand to see the strongest man I've ever known struggle anymore, so I loaded 2 syringes with morphine and put them under his tongue. I know it was the poison in his body. I know it was the sickness. I know he was suffering and I made the right decision. But I also have to live with the fact that I know the dose of morphine I administered was what ended it all for him. It's not easy knowing that you technically ended your father's life. My best friend died in a car wreck. He was the passenger and I was driving. I am so sorry this happened to you. My brother committed suicide on the weekend. I told him I couldn't visit due to work. Later down the road after I'd begun to recover, a friend told me if you were my best friend, I'd kill myself too, and I haven't spoke to him since. Jesus Christ, what a piece of crap. Being told my baby had died, and then having to deliver him. All of that was awful, but watching a stranger walk away with him knowing I wouldn't hold him again left me numb inside. Been there. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, or will ever do. Internet hugs, friend. Early sobriety. From alcohol. I'd rather relive the worst breakups of my life, the worst days of depression, than feel the way I did for weeks after stopping years of heavy alcohol abuse. I was in sheer emotional chaos. Good for you for getting clean, and now you know you're a seriously strong person to live through that. My mom has always been rather emotionally abusive. I remember being a little kid, and on my 5th birthday my brother had found a random ring in the dirt on his way home from school. Since it was my birthday, he gave it to me. Upon realizing that this ring was, in fact, a diamond ring, my mother said that I shouldn't have such an expensive piece of jewelry. She took it for herself instead. A couple weeks later I was laying in her bed admiring it when I said something. I don't remember exactly what, but it was about how it should be mine, or I wished I could have it or something. She flipped out, screaming at me. Enraged, she sent me to my room where I was crying on my bed. She came to my room a few minutes later, and I thought, hey, mom must have realized she overreacted. She's coming to apologize. Nope. Came in to say something else nasty, with nothing but disdain in her eyes. Like seriously, looking at me like she hated me. Saying something that cut me to my heart. The pain was terrible, all because 5-year-old me was passively upset that I didn't get to keep a random ring. Now my mother has done and said terrible things to me since then, like the time she kicked me out of the house and said she had wanted to abort me over some dishes in the sink, but this time always sticks in my head. I was so young and felt so betrayed by my parent. It's the first time I realized my mother's anger and rage can and would be irrational, and I walked on eggshells around her the rest of my life. Whoa, I feel so bad for you to go through all that so young. I wish I had your strength, I really do. My father died when I just graduated from college and he had just retired from the military. He had served for 35 years in the Marine Corps and had finally decided to call it quits. We weren't really that close, but I thought that maybe after he gets retired, we would have plenty of time to bond. My mom was also very happy at the time since they spend more time together. And then he dies of a heart failure 4 months into his retirement. My mom immediately gets depressed, leaving me to take care of all the preparations for his funeral. I had no idea where to begin. Thankfully, some of his Marine buddies helped out. One of the hardest thing I had to do was to call his first and second family. My mom was the third wife, and I was the 7th kid, and inform them what happened. I hated both of them. They treated us like dirt. Even my stepsisters. I was the only son. Never lifted a finger to help out. I did the eulogy, since nobody else wanted to do it, and could barely get out a sentence before I would weep. Weeks after, the first family demands that they get his retirement money from the military. My mom, in her current state, rolls over and signs over everything that they wanted. I had no job. My mom had no job. We had nothing to fall back on. We end up living with my grandmother. We spend Christmas in a cheap motel room hugging and crying each other to sleep because we were too broken and depressed to even celebrate the holidays. Worst thing, the morning when I last saw my dad alive, he told me that he really enjoyed spending more time with me and was planning a vacation for just the 3 of us. Breaks my heart just remembering that day. The death of my best friend. He was the sweetest, most giving person. He would give you the shirt off his back and his last dollar if he thought you needed it more than he did. He taught me how to do my makeup. I cried on his shoulder over every boy who broke my heart, as he cried on mine over the boys who broke his heart. We'd been friends since 4th grade and we were going to be friends forever. Then he developed cancer. I watched him fight. I watched him wither. He was only 21 years old when he died. It's been almost 10 years and I still cry knowing he's not there. I just got engaged and he's not going to be there to be my maid of honor like he always promised he would be, and it's not freaking fair. I lost my best friend to cancer nearly 4 years ago. Every day is still a struggle for me. I cannot bring myself to fully accept that she's gone. I still find myself going to text her if something funny happens. It's tearing me apart. Having to hold my son after we had to take him off life support and watching him take his last breath by far is the worst thing I've gone through. Other than that, being cheated on and ending a 17-year marriage. I suppose that two are a common occurrence when you lose a child. Not necessarily the cheating, but divorce. Things haven't been good for a while. The NICU. My daughter was born 13 weeks early. I lost count of the number of times I watched her stop breathing, or listened to alarms go off because her heart rate suddenly dropped. Hearing her cry day after day and being unable to pick her up. The worst. Going home at the end of the day, wondering if I'd wake up to bad news. She is fine now. Was supposed to be in the hospital at least 13 weeks. Made it out in 9. No lasting complications and is a 3-year hex spawn. I'm glad you have a hex spawn to deal with than a grave to visit. I couldn't imagine that. Coming across my father's dead body in the bedroom after just having spoken to him an hour before. I never got to say goodbye. I married the love of my life. I knew her for over 10 years before we even started dating. A couple of years after meeting her, I told my mother that she was the kind of girl I wanted to marry, and I did. We were married for 4 years and she cheated on me. Didn't want to work it out. Nothing. Just kicked to the wayside with not one look back. Completely obliterated my worldview. I mean, if I can't trust her, who can I trust? It showed me that anyone is capable of something like that. You can't assume anything about anyone, no matter how long you've known them. It's not just you. Stuff like this is why I am not married. My big brother dying of cancer. Not even necessarily him dying. because by that point I was just glad he wasn't suffering. But watching him get sicker and sicker, he was my best friend, and he basically raised me because our mum is a piece of crap. He was the picture of strength for me, my whole life. He taught me how to cook, how to ride a bike, took me to my first movie, my first gig. He is the sole reason I am who I am, and am able to be a functioning adult. He was also a super active person. He ran 100k marathons for fun, climbed, sailed, all sorts. Watching him go from running everywhere, climbing to the ceiling of buildings just cause he felt like it, making terrible jokes and generally being a goofy weirdo, to laying in a hospital bed, struggling to breathe and just wanting it to be over, was utterly soul destroying. My biggest solace is that the day he died we had an amazing heart-to-heart about everything that had happened, followed by him making the absolute worst pun that I have ever heard, and us losing our crap laughing. So yeah, that was freaking awful. If it's any consolation, there are probably so many people who read your comment and are envious of you for having such a fantastic sibling. Count me among them. In fact, he sounded like an exceptional human being. I posted another reply, but this one is completely different. I was going to a therapist for depression and anxiety and he ended up killing himself. That was rough to deal with. I have a daughter from a previous relationship. I was forbidden from contact by my ex's family when she was a few weeks old. I have always supported her financially but have never been allowed in her life. When she was a toddler I was laid off and my ex's family strong-armed me into signing away my rights. Part of the agreement I get visitation when my parents are utilized as babysitters. They have not been used as babysitters. It's just a loophole. She turned 13 this past September and it sucks missing her entire life because some people don't like me. Going through the last month of pregnancy knowing my mother was going to die of lung cancer and wouldn't live to see my kids grow up. Frick cigarettes. My mother and I were extremely close. I was her caregiver for the last 5 years of her life. She was the only one who never treated me differently after I came out. I was her rock, as she put it, ever since the death of my father. We weren't just mother and son. We were good friends. She was the last of what I considered my family. She was very ill and frail, but as stubborn as always. She wasn't supposed to try to walk around without someone assisting her. She decided, while I was napping, that a cigarette was more important than being told what to do. Her walker got caught up on the railing of the sliding glass door that led to the back patio. It tripped her up. She fell, hit her head on the pavement. I awoke to a stranger in my house, one of my neighbors. I learned, screaming for help. I applied as much pressure to the wound as I could, but with the blood thinners she'd been on, it wasn't enough. She effectively bled to death in my arms while waiting for EMS. While her body survived, she never returned. The last time she spoke my name was in the Tridge Center. She had a brief moment of lucidity and she saw me, called out my name, cried, and then slipped away again. The brain scans revealed a massive subarachnoid hemorrhage. The neurologist told me she was not a viable candidate for surgery due to her extant medical problems, and that there was nothing they could do. The best option for her would be to just let her go. I appreciated his candor. I signed the papers to end medical intervention and said my goodbye. She died 4 hours later. That was a little over 6 years ago now. I still fight the thought that if only I hadn't taken that nap. My fiance walked out on me about 3 weeks ago. Came home after a long day at work to a note and her ring on the counter. My life has been a mess since. I'm still pretty lost. I'm not very good at comforting people, so I love you. Seeing the pain my mom has felt when she lost her dad, went through surgery for a thankfully benign brain tumor, and the loss of her younger sister. It's not my pain, but seeing how much my mom has done to make sure me and my siblings led good lives make me appreciate her, and pains me that I haven't done anything with my life yet. Living with my rapist, not being able to talk to anyone, spent years not going outside unless it was for school, trying to kill myself and then acting like everything is normal, reading obituaries and wondering why it couldn't be me. Realizing I'm a pedophile exclusive, which mean I'm only attracted to kids, easily tops even family deaths. I was in complete denial for years, hoping I was a lesbian or even asexual, but nope. Everything in my life have just been in a steep downward spiral since then. And before anyone gets an aneurysm, no, I don't molest kids, I'm not a rapist. I don't view illegal monstrous acts online. I even do my best to avoid any kids in my day to day. I'd rather die than harm a kid. Have tried that twice but failed. I have a lot of respect for you for having realized that you have this condition and made the right choice in spite of it. The right choice by not molesting kids, not the suicide attempt part. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.